Is there a place in time where logic breaks down and wonderment begins? Could that be somewhere at some time along an infinite line between the reasonable and the highly unlikely? Join us on a journey into the improbable.
Today's story, episode 268, Employee 17. Read by Kathleen Connolly. Opening and closing theme by Matthew Erdman. Somewhere and sometime, what you are told is unimportant might turn out to be absolutely critical.
Satya fought to attach the cover plate to the filter. The bolts had been stripped a decade ago and should have been replaced years before that. But parts for the original infrastructure were no longer manufactured, and she had been forced to make her own or, like the bolts, continue to use them as is. No one came into the old section of the mining facility anyway, so keeping the equipment covers on was more a matter of pride than a practical necessity. She pushed the last threadbare bolt into its hole, then struggled up, back complaining even in the 1/6 gravity, and moved on to the next access point, eyes closed, counting steps. After 40 years of performing the same daily routine, she knew it so well that she could complete most of the tasks with her eyes closed, and took it as a challenge to do so. Although the old system had been relegated to a backup for the backup system, on the moon, there was no place to run to in the event of a complete failure. The chance of the old air scrubber being pressed into service was remote but not zero. This simple fact motivated Satya to keep going and do her best. After checking the next inspection port, replacing a faulty switch with one she had rebuilt, she closed up her tools and went for lunch. The cafeteria, located in the above-ground dome which housed surface operations, was mostly empty when she arrived. At one time, Satya had to line up to get in, but automation and the sinking price of helium-3 had reduced the number of people at the mine from 97 to 43. A small group of telepresence harvester operators sitting in the corner at a beat-up aluminum table waved her over. The company still found human operators cheaper than developing an AI to control the big harvesting machines which roamed the surface, scooping up the volatile, rich regolith. AIs were always getting confused by the shadows on the lunar surface, which were so dark the machine intelligences misidentified them as objects to be steered around, causing them to miss the highest concentrations of helium-3. "You're like clockwork, Satya," Prisha, a 20-something recruit from somewhere near Satya's home city of Bangalore, greeted cheerily. It was her first rotation and probably first off-world trip, so she still exuded excitement. Satya knew the boredom of the daily grind would soon wear down her enthusiasm to silent resignation. "Hello," Satya greeted, smiling politely before placing her tray down on the table and taking one of the empty seats. She looked around, noting that there wasn't a person over 30, making her the oldest by at least 3 decades. The telepresence operators came and went in 10-month rotations. Some returned for multiple tours after spending enough time on Earth to recover from the ravages of low gravity. However, as wages and bonuses were cut, even the new recruits who were attracted by the company's propaganda that mining Shackleton Crater on the moon was an adventure of a lifetime did one rotation and then quit. They soon discovered the work was basically no more exciting than remote operating a deep-sea mining dredge. The main difference being on Earth, there was somewhere to go at the end of a shift other than a dingy recreation room with recycled air. "How's your day going?" Prisha asked, trying to strike up a conversation. "The same as always," Satya said, distractedly exploring her rehydrated lunch. "Nothing new means I'm having a successful day." "Yeah, can you imagine doing that for 40 years? Pace, a balding operator in his late 20s, sneered. "That'd drive anyone with half a brain crazy. This is my last rotation, so I'm out of here before I turn into a fossil like Satya there." He nodded at the old engineer. Satya was used to being the brunt of comments about her age. Being the only permanent resident of the base, she was a fixture which was mostly ignored, like the harsh bluish overhead lights. However, when there was nothing else to talk about, she sometimes became the target of idle speculation, such as she was wanted on Earth and couldn't go back. Everyone except Satya was on rotation. None were there long enough to bother making friends with, so she tolerated their antics and they mostly left her alone, except the odd one like Pace. Be nice, Pace, a woman whose name escaped Satya warned. It was her second rotation, if Satya recalled correctly, one of only 4 from the previous group who had come back. Which didn't surprise Satya. Sitting in a chair for 12 hours, remoting a harvester, along with the constant pressure to make quotas, made it a job she wouldn't want to do. She preferred maintenance. No one bothered her as long as the old air scrubber was in the green. No, that's okay. Pace is right, Satya admitted. You don't want to end up like me. I can't go back. My heart isn't strong enough. Been up here too long. I thought everyone had to leave after 10 months, Prisha pointed out. Satya made a face at her food, pushed the tray away, and sighed. She had to explain her unique situation almost every time the rotation changed, bringing new recruits. When I first got here, things weren't that well organized, she began to explain, and somehow I got left off the rotation list. It was some type of computer glitch, I guess. Anyway, my name never appeared on the shuttle roster, and back then, the only thing I was concerned with was making money, so I didn't point out the error. 3 solid years without a break helped me accumulate quite a nice stash. Then a new HR manager noticed and figured out what had happened. He wanted to send me back, and I would have gone too, but I failed the medical. It was already too late. My heart and bones were too weak to survive a return. So you can never go back then, even with therapy? Prisha asked, genuine concern creeping into her voice. There's no therapy for low-G adaptation unless someone invents an artificial gravity machine so I can slowly rebuild my tolerance, Satya lamented. Maybe rotational gravity, Pace suggested, surprisingly sympathetic for once. Like a rotating wheel in orbit or something. For one person, Satya scoffed. The company felt guilty about the error, but not guilty enough to put out any substantial amount of money. Giving me a job and keeping me here was the cheapest thing they could do to avoid an embarrassing lawsuit. I'm pretty sure they've forgotten about me by now. But I don't care. I just keep doing my job. It's not really that bad. Another 5 shifts and I'll be pensioned out. But if you can't go back to Earth, where will you go when you retire? Prisha asked. One of the lunar hotels, that's the agreement. Legally, they should never have let me stay here long enough to permanently damage my body, Satya explained. There are no retirement homes on the moon, just mines, research stations, and hotels. People pay big money to come up here to take a holiday. So I'm looking forward to becoming the first long-term resident in 5-star luxury at Hilton Base. I hear the menu changes every day. Satya frowned at her tray. 40 years of the same lunch gets a bit old. She joked, got up and shoved the tray's contents into a recycle chute. Hey, I heard that the mine's been sold, Pace announced out of the blue, stopping Satya dead in her tracks. She spun around. When? To whom? It was a few weeks ago. I don't know who, but the new owner's sending some kind of consultants up here to look around. They're supposed to be arriving on the next shuttle. Thanks, that's good to know, Satya said dismissively, but her stomach felt like it was in free fall. She had barely a week left, just a couple more shifts to get through, and didn't want any unforeseen complications. Not wanting to hear more upsetting news, she decided to avoid the lunchroom. Instead, she bought food from the automat and ate it on-site in the old underground section of the base where she worked. That was where she was 4 days later when the consultants finally caught up to her. After completing barely a third of the maintenance circuit, she was taking a break, sitting on a gray water pipe protruding out of a wall. Satya almost dropped her aluminum cup of steaming rehydrated soup, spilling some of it on the floor when her handheld chirped with a message. Out of force of habit, she wiped up the soup before looking at the tiny device's battered screen, unable to recall the last time someone had used the old comm system to contact her. Satya touched the blinking message icon, half expecting it not to work. However, the device immediately responded by spilling the content of the message across the screen. 1425 Conference Room D, your work plan is required. Satya stared at the words, hoping it was just some formality about her retirement. Satya Oliveira, your employee 17, a young man Satya had never seen before confirmed. You are the only original employee still on the payroll. Interesting, but that's not why we asked you here. Things have changed since this operation was opened. There are other sources of helium-3 now, and the market for fusion energy is saturated. That means we need to reduce costs to stay competitive. We have been hired by the new owners to look at every process and implement efficiencies. Do you have your work plan? Satya squirmed in an uncomfortable chair facing a trim man and woman dressed in expensive business suits that were starkly out of place in a lunar environment. They sat across a scratched and pitted conference table from her, which was probably one of the few things on the base that had been there longer than Satya. She had come early and waited almost half an hour before the two consultants finally showed up. When they arrived, their earth-toned muscles over-responded, causing them to bump into each other like clowns as they bounced into the room. Satya had been forced to hold back a snicker. "Imagine you are trying to walk on a trampoline," Satya had offered as they struggled into their seats. Neither acknowledged her advice or existence until they had settled down and logged into their tablets. Defiantly, Satya dropped her beat-up handheld on the table. "This is my maintenance schedule," she explained. "I don't have a work plan. I don't even know what one is. All I have is that schedule which I was told to follow by the original mine owners, and I have stuck to it every shift for the last 14,610 days. All the records are in my handheld. There's a lot of overtime here. It's what's flagged you in the system," the woman noted coldly, consulting her tablet. Satya shrugged. "I'm the only maintenance engineer assigned to that system, and the schedule," she nodded toward her handheld, "needs to be followed every day. So yes, holidays and weekends would have incurred overtime." "I don't see any overtime authorizations," the man noted curtly. "It's a 7-day-a-week schedule and I'm the only maintenance engineer," Satya explained again, getting impatient. "There hasn't been a day since I started that I didn't complete everything on that schedule. Here, take a look for yourself." She touched her handheld to the closest tablet to transfer the files. "We'll take a look at your records, Miss Oliveira, and get back to you," the woman said with a forced smile, then both got up and left. As she had for decades, at 7 a.m. sharp, Satya placed her hand on the reader, mounted to the wall next to the access hatch for the old mechanical room. Instead of flashing green and releasing the bolts holding the airtight door closed, the reader showed an error. Satya tried again with the same result, and was about to take the thing apart to see what had gone wrong when she heard someone behind her. She swiveled around, surprised to find a security robot. The bots normally hung around the processing rooms and workers' quarters, searching for contraband or stolen H3, so she was confused by its appearance in the old mechanical room. "Employee 17, it confirmed in an authoritative voice through a small, tinny speaker mounted to its chest. The bot stood taller than most humans. A sensor ring girdled its headless stub of a neck. Satya had once heard they had been designed to intimidate, but the security bots didn't bother her. As a maintenance engineer, she knew how to disable them. "Follow me," it directed, waited for her to pack up her tools, then turned to go. It was pointless asking it anything. Satya knew the machine's tiny brain wasn't designed for conversation, and that only the administration had control of them. She found it odd the bot had been sent to collect her. Why hadn't they simply messaged? She pulled out her handheld and checked. For some reason, it wasn't connected to the base network. The bot brought her to the same conference room she had been in the day before and took up a position outside like a tin soldier. The two consultants were waiting for her when the door slid open. "Ah, Miss Oliveira, thank you for coming," the woman said. "Please take a seat." "Did I have a choice?" Satya asked sarcastically. "There was no need to send a bot to escort me." "But there was," the man corrected. "All your access has been revoked. None of the airtight doors would have let you through." Satya was taken completely off guard by the comment. Shocked, she sat down and stared questioningly at the consultants. "It's standard practice when we terminate a contract. Especially in your case, you had access to virtually everywhere on the base," the man explained. "I don't understand," Satya said, confused. "Terminate? You mean you've terminated me?" "We've had issues in the past," the woman added, ignoring Satya's question. "Contractors not happy with our decision to terminate damaged company property, so as a precaution, we revoke all access before we inform the affected party." "I still don't get it," Satya complained. Tomorrow was my last shift. Why would you? If we had waited, we would have been forced to pay for your retirement accommodations, the man said distractedly as he flipped through screens on his tablet, which, depending on how long you would have lived, could have become a considerable financial liability for the mine's new owners, the woman added. But we had an agreement, Satya protested. I wouldn't sue or tell the media about the error and the company would take care of me. That was the deal. Your post-employment care agreement only kicks in at retirement, the woman pointed out. It is one of the extraneous costs we have been tasked to eliminate. So you can appreciate we had to terminate your employment before you reach that date. But I only need one more day, Satya pleaded. The simple fact is the new owners are not responsible for the oversight which originally trapped you here, Miss Oliveira, the woman explained. Your beef is with the original owner and you are more than welcome to take them to court. However, we are under no obligation to offer you work to take you through to retirement. The man found what he was looking for and pushed his tablet across the table to Satya. Please take a look, Miss Oliveira, he encouraged. As you can see from that report, the backup system you've been maintaining all these years isn't even listed in the inventory. We had to dig through the records until we discovered it had been decommissioned 39 years ago. I suppose it was just another oversight, like the one which got you stuck here in the first place. The new owners will never let that happen again, the woman assured. So we hope you can appreciate our position. You've been paid for 39 years to maintain a system which is not used. But it's the backup for the backup, Satya attempted to point out. You don't understand. It's a near vacuum outside, instant death if the environmental systems fail. The moon is unforgiving, so there is never enough redundancy. No system is ever taken completely offline just in case. The consultants checked their tablets again, glanced at each other, and some agreement seemed to pass between them. Then the man said, Rather than an oversight, we believe this may have been a make-work project. We're surprised the former owners didn't inform us of it. Regardless, as you can see, they kept you on to compensate for the unfortunate error which has prevented you from leaving the moon. I'm sure any court would agree that was more than enough. Now, if you don't mind, we are on a tight schedule and have to move on to other issues. The bot outside will escort you to your room, where you can collect your personal belongings. We've generously paid for a 100-kilo luggage allowance on the next shuttle to lunar orbit. But I can't go back to Earth, Satya protested, and I don't have enough saved to live in one of the lunar hotels without the agreement. The man shrugged. Well, you can't stay here. We're not running a retirement home. I'm sure with your savings you can work something out, maybe a slot on one of the old commercial stations in low Earth orbit. I believe a few of them are leasing space to seniors with mobility issues. You'll have to pay for the transfer from lunar to low Earth orbit, of course. Satya watched a low-pressure system build over the North Atlantic and slowly move west, headed for the Caribbean Sea. A chime announced that her time in the observation cupola was up. There was only one in the staff section of the old space station, and the demand for time in it was high. The facility, which originally was built for manufacturing, had been converted to house 100 wealthy seniors whose joints, hearts, and circulation systems fared better in microgravity. Satya rented a sleeping bag on the spaceward side of the staff section and felt lucky she had even been able to afford that by doing maintenance on the life support systems. Grasping a handhold, she pulled herself out of the cupola, past the line to get in, and floated down the passageway to a modest-sized open area. Several off-duty staff were zoned out, watching a news report on the large screen mounted on the bulkhead, which separated staff quarters from the larger rented volume of the station. A file photo of Shackleton Crater flashed on, catching her attention. Satya snagged onto a stanchion so she could read the Hindi captions. The Shackleton Helium-3 mining station at the south pole of the moon had to be evacuated last night, shutting production down indefinitely. North Star Isotopes, who recently took over operations, claim an old environmental system they thought had been decommissioned failed, venting the base's atmosphere. Satya smiled knowingly, and couldn't stop herself from laughing.
You can help us continue creating original content twice a month by either heading over to ko-fi.com/makeshiftstories and making a one-time donation, or becoming an ongoing supporter at patreon.com/makeshiftstories. Makeshift Stories is released around the beginning and middle of the month. This month's story was written by Alan V. Hare and read by Kathleen Connolly. Opening and closing themes were composed and recorded by Matthew Erdman. Audio production and editing by Makeshift Studios. If you'd like to connect with us, please send an email to makeshiftstories@gmail.com or visit our website at makeshiftstories.com. Links to both are in the show notes. Makeshift Stories is released under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution, no derivative license, which means you are free to share our stories. Just remember to credit us and don't alter anything.